All right, the draft was on Friday because Nick Bass from the Canes Prospect Twitter, also the Substack, which I read religiously. I read about Ivan Ryabkin before the Hurricanes drafted him in the second round, or was it the third round? I think it was the second round. And I even quoted you or referred to you, Nick, during the podcast on Saturday night. Nick joins us, also Nick But Not on Twitter. Carolina did well in terms of what they turned a first and a third into, yes?
Yeah, 100%. Turning a first and a third into multiple seconds and the guys they got around that position, that is very good work for them.
All right, when you were putting together your players to watch, and I've been reading these throughout, when you were putting these together, did you think that here's players who Carolina might be interested at 29?
Yes, there was a couple guys that I had around that spot. The ones that I can remember off the top of my head being Alexander Zhuravsky, who went to Montreal, and Mason West, who went to Chicago, who traded up.
Right.
Those are the two I remember the most. But, yeah, there was a couple guys around 29. But this year specifically was such a great year to just trade back and get more assets going forward. And they did that and got a couple guys that could make a difference in the future.
Yeah, you wrote about Mason West as well. And West was the football player, right?
Yeah, 3-star quarterback in Minnesota.
3-star. It's not a lot. Not a lot of stars. Anyway, that's fine. Let him play. He's going to play one more year of high school football. Nick Bass, Canes Prospects, at Canes Prospects on Twitter. Also the Substack where I read a ton leading into the draft. So why don't we start with the goalie? I don't believe you might have written about the goalies in a post that I missed. But the goalie, I saw the highlights. Goalie certainly looked like a future, a legitimate prospect to me.
Yeah, Semyon Frolov was one of the highest rated guys that I was on. Obviously, he's a big Russian. He's 6'3". He's very good technically. I think he still needs to rein in some of the wildness, which I think Canes fans know that having a wild Russian goalie from time to time isn't a bad thing, but it definitely needs to be toned down. But a lot of his stats from the third division of Russia, the NHL, have looked really, really solid. Big Russian goalie, you bet on the traits, and down the line, people have been really high on him to be like a 1A starter, potentially, probably closer to a 1B, but that's definitely something really good to take in the second round.
I was actually surprised that Carolina, given what's in their organization pipeline right now, I was kind of surprised they didn't take 3 goalies of their 7 picks, because they're really, Carolina's got to basically shop around to find goaltending depth. Spencer Martin and Dustin Tokarski are nice, but they found themselves last year at a point where Martin and Tokarski were the tandem, and that you just can't have that as the case. Before I get to the rest of the Russians, what did you think of Charlie Serado in the second round?
It definitely caught me off guard just because he is a double overager as he's already 20. But the more research I did into the player, the more I came around on him because of just the higher floor that he has. He had a great freshman year at Penn State where he really proved that he can be a top 6 center on a really good college team. And that is definitely something the Canes would like to value. And it seems like he can play center going forward. He was really strong in the dot for a very good Penn State team. So I'm interested to see how he goes on next year because that's a guy that could probably be in the NHL sooner rather than later than a lot of these guys they took this year.
Yeah, it almost like he doesn't profile exactly the same way, but it almost seems like they drafted Jack Drury.
Kind of, yeah. I can kind of see that. I might like Serado a little bit more offensively, but Drury would have him beat defensively right now.
Yeah, but just think about where Jack Drury would be if not every goal was called back for somebody interfering with a goaltender. Nick Bass, Canes Prospects, is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. All right, now let's get back into the Russians. I read your write-up of Ivan Ryabkin before the draft, and I thought, man, this sounds exactly like somebody Carolina would take because he's going to be all over the map. There were red flags all over the place. I'd read about a bunch of other things, like there's attitude, there's conditioning, blah, blah, blah. But there was production everywhere he went, whether it was Russia or even in Muskegon for 30 or 27 games where he had 30 points. There was production, and the elite prospects profile of him isn't very different from what you wrote about. That like he plays in a way that Carolina doesn't have. He plays with an attitude.
Yeah, he is. I tried to post some highlights after the draft. It took me a minute to find everything, but he plays very physically. He might be a little too aggressive on some of these hits, but he throws some mean ones, and that's for being listed at 5'11", even though he is about 205 or 206.
Yeah.
I'm actually at Kane's camps, and I was looking at a sheet, but yeah, he's built like a fridge, basically. He throws really heavy hits, and he has a very dynamic offensive skill set. If everything can work out, you're talking about a guy that's probably a top 10 to 20 talent in this class if he can put everything together. A guy that can be, in the top 6 and potentially on your power play.
So do you understand why teams shy away from Russian players?
The last couple years, yes, because I think they've been worried about, getting players over and maybe getting tape on some guys, getting in real life viewings. But I think the Canes and also as well the Canadians, they've been very adept at being like, hey, we'll gladly take these guys that, other teams might pass over, and we see the value in them, and that's why you've seen guys like, Nikita Artemonov from last year just, was one of the best rookies or second-year players in the KHL, and how they got so much value out of the past few years is that teams are a little nervous about these guys actually making it to North America. But, NCAA has been maybe not just as bad, or it could be just as bad with some of these guys that have left. So I think it's like that. I think scouts called it the Russian factor. I think it's falling by the wayside at this point, but it's still there to a certain extent.
The Hurricanes certainly seem like they got pretty good value, certainly in at least one of the two Russian defensemen. Limitov, who's 6'3", 200 pounds, when asked who the best defenseman in the NHL was, answered me in 5 years. If confidence matters, they certainly have checked that box. What are your thoughts on Limitov?
I was very happy to see him get taken in the third round. A lot of places has him, late first, early second. And when you watch the kid who is 6'4" and almost 200 pounds skate, you are blown away. He is one of the most effortless skaters. His mobility is excellent. He is just, when you have a base like that for the size that he is, if he develops some of the other aspects, you are talking about a guy that could be a top 4 defender in the future. And if he fills out the frame, he plays aggressive. It was a heck of a pick in my opinion.
We're talking with Nick Bass, Canes Prospects, on Twitter. Also, the Substack, you should check that out. The other guy, Bausov, I don't know how to pronounce his name. We're certainly we're not going to have to worry about communicating with Alexander Nikishin anymore because half the team is going to be Russian. 6'5", 190 pounds. And Darren York talked about he's a good skater, but he's got such great range and reach. And he said this is the way the game is going when you're trying to take away space. There's less space when you've got guys with a wingspan of 9 feet. Yeah,
Bausov was a lot lesser known, but he's 6'5". He's a right-handed defenseman. His skating is already really solid. He's pretty physical again, which is nice for a guy of his size. He's a little bit behind Limitov in terms of where the offense is and maybe his defense to a certain extent. But you bet on the physical intangibles that he already has and his skating developing alongside with him. So it's another really solid pick for a guy, again, that's gigantic and a right-handed defenseman, which seemed to be the theme of the draft this year. If you were under 6 feet tall, you were just not even getting looked at.
All right, before we let you go, the two Swedes they took in the 6th and 7th rounds, Viggo Nordlund and Philip Ekberg. I love that. What do you think?
Viggo Nordland played with one Canes prospects over the past couple years in Oscar Voulet, and his offensive talent is unbelievable. A lot of his offensive ability is close to dynamic. His skating is really good. I think the issues with him is going to be people are going to see 5'9", 5'10", and be a little thrown off. But a player like that with the skill he possesses, you bet on and hope that he can just continue going. And if he ends up developing, some more physicality in his game to where he's not, getting pushed off the puck, that is a player that you really, really like, especially with that amount of skill. Ekberg was one I was very shocked to see him fall that far because of just how well he did at the U18 World Juniors. He absolutely dominated the event with, I believe, 18 points in 8 games. He won MVP. He had a really good close to the year with the Ottawa 67s in the OHL.
Yeah.
And again, he's another player that has he's halfway decent skating wise. That probably needs to improve, but the offensive ability is something you bet on, especially in the 7th round when you can get a guy that dominated against players his own age. You bet on his skill continuing to develop.
All right, final thing, and then we will say goodbye to Nick Bass. And this is about current prospects, and I'm not going to ask you. We all know Bradley Nadeau can score goals, and it remains to be seen whether he scores goals for Carolina or if he's used as a chip to get something else. But behind Scott Morrow, what can you tell us about Joel Nystrom or Badinka, their first pick in the second round from last year, in terms of pushing Morrow to be maybe the next right defenseman up?
So Joel Nystrom is definitely up there. He's one of the best skaters out of their whole prospect pool. He was very good with Fargestad in the SHL, which is Sweden's top league. He was one of their better defensemen for the better part of 3 to 4 years. Him coming to North America is big. I'm still a little leery on saying how close ready he is, just because the transition from Europe and places like that to North America is different. But I like how he looked in the last few games for Chicago to end the year, and I do really like his chances to become an NHL player down the line. But Dinka is a lot more raw. He really needs another season at the AHL level to fully develop, and I would not sleep on, personally, their other right-handed defenseman on the Wolves roster, Charles Alexis Legault, who, if we all remember, had the fight in the preseason. He is a big, physical shutdown defender who impressed me a lot with how he played for the Wolves over the past, the whole season. He really developed into, their first unit PK right-handed defenseman, a guy they could trust to play in their top 4. And, he's still not that old. He's only 21 years old. He'll turn 22 in September, but he is a guy that I definitely see having an NHL future. And if the Canes are looking for a guy that is a lot more defense-oriented than somebody like Scott Morrow, I definitely think Legault would have a look there.
Yeah, I actually talked to Tim Gleason about him last training camp, and he loves him. And he plays with some physicality, and Carolina's obviously looking for that. Jacob Slavin told me he would like to see the team become a little bit harder to play against physically. And he called himself out for it, but we don't need Jacob Slavin to do things that Jacob Slavin doesn't need to do. Let other people do that, Jacob. Nick Bass, Canes prospect on Substack, also Twitter, and Nick But Not for personal thoughts on things. I appreciate your time, man, and I know you're out there at development camp. Thank you very much for giving us a few minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on.
You got it. Nick Bass here on The Adam Gold Show.